Grey Wolf, Raven, and Silent Fang, 3 names whispered in fear across the UK. Hitmen, so skilled that even the police were powerless to stop them. Their shadowy operations left no trace, their victims vanished without warning, and their true identities remain a mystery to this day. The rise of the organization known as the Ledger began quietly, without any public attention or official warning. Its earliest activities blended into ordinary crime patterns, allowing its members to operate without attracting suspicion. Police initially saw the scattered killings as isolated incidents connected to local disputes or gang conflicts. Nothing suggested a larger force was at work, but in time, a disturbing pattern slowly emerged. Each victim was targeted with remarkable accuracy, as though someone had studied their routines for weeks. The murders took place in busy cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham, yet witnesses could never provide more than vague descriptions. Some remembered seeing a helmeted rider leaving at high speed, while others mentioned a figure slipping into a crowd before disappearing completely. Investigators began comparing cases from different regions and noticed similarities so precise they could not be ignored. The attackers always used clean exits, avoided unnecessary violence, and left behind no fingerprints or clear CCTV images. This level of control suggested a professional hand, not random street crime. Detectives started to believe that these killings came from a structured network rather than independent individuals. Soon, the name The Ledger surfaced in intelligence reports, a rumored group of contract killers who accepted jobs only through encrypted channels. The name came from the belief that every target was written into a secret ledger that only the group's leader controlled. The ledger's existence remained unproven, but fear spread quickly among both criminals and law enforcement. Those who committed serious financial or violent crimes knew that enemies could hire this group to settle scores permanently. Police officers, meanwhile, felt unsettled because the killers operated as though they already knew every weakness in the system. They struck at moments when patrols were thin, when cameras were blocked by construction, or when officers were occupied with other incidents. It appeared as though the killers had perfect timing, leaving investigators frustrated and helpless. One of the most alarming discoveries was that none of the early victims had been robbed. Their wallets, jewelry, and vehicles remained untouched. This confirmed that the murders were not motivated by greed or impulse. Someone had paid for specific deaths, and the hitman's only mission was to complete the task efficiently. For police, this raised terrifying questions. How large was this organization? Who controlled it? How were they finding targets? And why had they chosen this moment to spread across the UK? Reports from informants added even more confusion. Some described the Ledger as a group of former soldiers trained in covert operations. Others claimed the members were young men, with no criminal records, recruited for their ability to blend into urban environments. A few even believed the group used advanced technology to track targets, making them nearly impossible to outrun. No version could be confirmed, but every rumor strengthened the sense that something new and dangerous had taken hold. As pressure grew, senior officials worried that the murders marked the beginning of a long, organized campaign. With no suspects, no motives, and no reliable witnesses, investigators felt powerless. The country faced hitmen who behaved like shadows, striking without hesitation and disappearing before anyone realized what had happened. The Ledger had entered the UK, and its presence would soon shake the nation. The first real breakthrough in the investigation came unexpectedly, in a part of Leeds that had long been considered quiet. On a stormy night, a stolen motorbike lost control on a slick road and crashed into a narrow alley. At first, it seemed like a simple accident, another petty crime to be filed and forgotten. But when officers inspected the wreckage, they discovered something that would change the entire investigation. Hidden inside a small compartment beneath the seat was a folder filled with papers, codes, and meticulously written lists. The documents contained names, addresses, and dates, all of which corresponded to individuals who had been targeted or killed in the previous months. It became clear that this was no ordinary criminal organization. This was a highly organized network of killers operating with precision and purpose. The discovery stunned law enforcement. Here, at last, was proof that these murders were coordinated, premeditated, and planned far in advance. For the first time, police realized that the hitmen were not random actors, but part of a larger system that tracked and eliminated targets methodically. The list was coded, each symbol and number representing a specific person or operation. Investigators had to call in cryptographers and data analysts to decipher it, and when they finally did, the scale of the ledger's operation became horrifyingly clear. The organization did not target ordinary criminals alone. Their focus included politicians, businessmen, and high-level criminals involved in money laundering, fraud, and organized crime. Each hit was a calculated move, designed not only to eliminate an individual, but also to send a message to others who might challenge the group's authority. The scope suggested a level of planning that far surpassed any police operation at the time. The discovery also revealed the killer's extensive knowledge of urban landscapes. Each entry included detailed notes about travel routes, billing layouts, and surveillance blind spots. It became obvious that the hitmen had studied their targets' lives thoroughly, learning habits, routines, and vulnerabilities. The organization operated like a military unit, with roles assigned to each member, and each movement timed with precision. Even small details, such as the timing of street cleaners or shifts at security checkpoints, were considered in planning attacks. Investigators realized that capturing these killers would require more than traditional policing. It would demand intelligence operations, surveillance, and patience on a scale that few departments had ever undertaken. Public awareness of the group began to grow, as news outlets reported on the string of unsolved murders and the mysterious stolen documents. Citizens grew fearful, unsure who might be next, and ordinary criminals began to respect or fear the existence of the ledger. Rumors spread that the organization only accepted contracts from wealthy clients or rival criminal organizations, charging sums so high that few could afford to pay. This further added to the sense of invincibility surrounding the hitmen. The police, meanwhile, were forced to admit that they were dealing with a network that seemed to have no limits, no fixed base, and no predictable patterns. The discovery in Leeds was a turning point, confirming that the country faced a highly organized, methodical, and dangerous criminal entity that could strike anywhere, at any time, with almost total impunity. The investigation had entered a new and far more dangerous phase, one in which every lead could be a trap, and every breakthrough could bring both clarity and deadly risk. Among all the suspects linked to the ledger, one figure stood out above the rest. A man known only as Grey Wolf. His reputation had grown from whispers in criminal circles to urgent warnings within police intelligence reports. Unlike other members of the organization, Grey Wolf operated with a level of skill and cunning that suggested formal training, discipline, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Investigators believed he was behind at least 9 high-profile killings, each executed with a cold precision that left almost no traces. Unlike the chaotic violence often associated with gangs, Grey Wolf's operations were swift, almost surgical, and always left investigators frustrated. What set him apart was not just his skill in planning, but his ability to vanish without a trace, leaving authorities with nothing more than speculation and fear. Grey Wolf was thought to have a background in private security or special forces, giving him advanced knowledge of tactical operations, surveillance detection, and escape strategies. Police analysts noted that in every incident linked to him, he had studied the surrounding environment extensively before striking. He understood the patterns of city life, pedestrian traffic, the timing of streetlights, camera blind spots, and the routines of potential witnesses. It was as if he could map an entire neighborhood in his mind, predicting every movement of civilians, police, and his target. This mastery of urban landscapes made him nearly impossible to anticipate, and traditional law enforcement methods often fell short against his expertise. Investigators became increasingly obsessed with understanding Grey Wolf. They examined every piece of forensic evidence from previous crime scenes, studying realistic patterns, entry points, and escape routes. But the deeper they looked, the more elusive he became. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to learn from mistakes, avoiding any behavior that had previously drawn attention. Grey Wolf never repeated patterns that could identify him, which made tracking him a constant challenge. Officers began to suspect that he treated each job like a tactical operation, planning multiple contingencies and exit strategies in case something went wrong. It wasn't just his skill that was frightening, it was his discipline, patience, and unwavering focus. Reports suggested that Grey Wolf often used disguises, changing his appearance and behavior so completely that even close witnesses failed to provide reliable descriptions. He could blend into a crowd, assume a different accent, or mimic ordinary routines while remaining fully aware of his surroundings. In some cases, he appeared to strike at random, but analysts later discovered hidden patterns that revealed his meticulous planning. Every move seemed deliberate, each pause a calculated decision, every escape route a carefully considered option. It was this combination of patience, adaptability, and intelligence that allowed him to remain one step ahead of the authorities. Grey Wolf's presence cast a shadow over the investigation. Detectives realized that capturing him would not only require skill but ingenuity. Any direct confrontation could result in failure or casualties. Officers had to think like him, anticipate his decisions, and prepare for every possibility. The UK's most wanted hitman had become the ultimate challenge for law enforcement, a ghost in the city who seemed to operate outside the rules of ordinary crime. With every passing day, Grey Wolf's legend grew, and the fear surrounding the ledger intensified. His existence proved that the organization was not only well-funded and organized, but also capable of producing a mastermind whose brilliance made the police look powerless. The hunt for Grey Wolf was no longer just about stopping a killer. It had become a test of wits, patience, and survival against an enemy who seemed to anticipate every move before it happened. Months of careful surveillance and intelligence gathering finally led police to believe they had an opportunity to stop the ledger in a high-stakes operation. Authorities had received a credible tip that a prominent politician was the next target, and every detail suggested that the hit would occur in central London. For the first time, law enforcement felt that they had the upper hand. Teams were deployed across rooftops, in nearby buildings, and along streets that could serve as escape routes. Drones scanned the area, capturing live feeds that officers monitored with precision. Undercover units mingled with crowds, keeping a watchful eye for anyone behaving suspiciously. Every angle was accounted for, and every officer involved was acutely aware of the stakes. The city held its breath, unaware that a life-or-death game was about to unfold in its busiest district. Despite the overwhelming preparation, nothing could have truly prepared the officers for what followed. The operation began in the early evening, just as the streets were busy with commuters, tourists, and shoppers. A figure appeared on the surveillance monitors, someone moving with complete confidence, seemingly unaware of the heavy police presence. Every step was deliberate, almost rehearsed. The hitman navigated narrow alleyways, darted across open squares, and avoided every surveillance camera in sight. For the officers, it was surreal. Every route they had secured or blocked seemed to be anticipated and bypassed. It quickly became clear that they were dealing with someone with extensive knowledge of the city's infrastructure. Someone who had memorized every shortcut, blind spot, and hidden tunnel. The moment of the planned attack was terrifyingly swift. Within seconds, the target was approached and then, just as quickly, the figure disappeared into the shadows. Officers rushed to intervene, but every exit they expected the killer to use had already been abandoned in favor of an alternative route that had been unknown to them. Later investigations revealed that the hitman had utilized maintenance tunnels, emergency stairwells, and service corridors inaccessible to the public. It was a masterclass in evasion, executed with the precision of someone who had trained for years in clandestine operations. The target, remarkably, was unharmed, but the sting of failure left the police shaken and questioning every assumption they had made. The failed trap also highlighted a chilling truth about the ledger. They were always one step ahead. The organization's hitmen didn't rely solely on brute force. They relied on intelligence, observation, and psychological advantage. Each operation was rehearsed and calculated, and their ability to adapt on the fly made them virtually untouchable. Police officers, despite months of preparation, realized that traditional tactics were insufficient against such adversaries. The killer had anticipated every move, and the escape route itself was designed to mislead and confuse anyone attempting to follow. After the operation, investigators reviewed footage, maps and logs for hours, trying to reconstruct the sequence of events. What they uncovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The killer had treated the city itself as a weapon. Buildings, streets, traffic patterns and human movement were all part of an invisible strategy. No conventional security system or patrol could have stopped it. The failure forced police to rethink their approach entirely, recognizing that the Ledger's hitmen were not just dangerous, they were operating in a class of their own, blending strategy, patience and cunning in ways that made even the most experienced officers feel powerless. The failed operation would become a pivotal moment in the investigation. It demonstrated the hitmen's extraordinary capabilities, their meticulous planning, and their ability to turn even well-prepared law enforcement efforts into spectacles of futility. It was a stark warning that the Ledger could strike anywhere, at any time, and that no corner of the city was truly safe. The police had glimpsed the full scope of the enemy they were facing, and it was far more formidable than anyone had imagined. After months of relentless activity, the Ledger suddenly entered a period of unexpected silence. The string of killings that had terrorized multiple cities abruptly stopped, leaving both the public and police bewildered. Investigators initially hoped that their increased vigilance and targeted operations had begun to yield results, believing that the hitmen had been deterred by pressure from law enforcement. Yet, as days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the lull in activity was not due to police intervention, but something far more complex within the organization itself. The Ledger, it seemed, was not invincible, and internal tensions had begun to fracture its operation. The group's leadership, once seen as a single, impenetrable command, was now divided over strategy, control, and loyalty. Some members wanted to expand operations beyond the UK, seeing lucrative opportunities in Europe, while others argued that such expansion would expose them to unnecessary risk. Disagreements over payments, methods, and alliances deepened the rift, causing confusion and hesitation among even the most experienced hitmen. Internal mistrust spread quickly. Members began to question orders, suspecting that colleagues might be planning betrayals. The fear of being eliminated from within the organization became as real as the threat posed by the police, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and instability. The lull also exposed vulnerabilities that investigators had been eager to exploit. With fewer hits taking place, intelligence units had more time to analyze past operations, compare methods, and look for weaknesses in the group's structure. Small fragments of information began to leak from criminal networks, as some low-level operatives grew anxious or attempted to protect themselves. Even then, the identities of the top hitmen, including Grey Wolf, remained shrouded in mystery. The leaders had cultivated a system that ensured operational secrecy, and despite internal conflicts, they had managed to shield themselves from exposure. Meanwhile, the public perception of the Ledger began to shift. Fear persisted, but the sudden pause in killings gave criminals and ordinary citizens alike a sense of fragile relief. Rumors circulated that the organization might have disbanded entirely or that its leaders were being hunted down by rival factions. Analysts noted that such speculation, while unverified, indicated the psychological impact of the group's internal chaos. For law enforcement, however, the temporary silence was not a victory. It was a precarious pause, a moment to prepare for the next wave, which would likely be even more dangerous once the organization resolved its disputes. Investigators pieced together a pattern that explained the sudden cessation of activity. The Ledger was experiencing what could be called an internal civil war. Each faction maneuvered cautiously, fearful of betrayal, yet driven by ambition. The discord created delays in decision-making and disrupted the coordination that had made the organization so formidable. Officers realized that this period of weakness was a rare opportunity to gather intelligence, capture lower-level operatives, and study the mechanisms of the network without immediate risk of retaliation. Despite the apparent calm, the threat remained very real. Even fragmented, the ledger retained access to resources, trained operatives, and a ruthless code of efficiency. Police knew that once the internal conflicts resolved, the organization would return stronger and more elusive than ever. The silence of the ledger was not a sign of defeat, but a prelude, a temporary pause that masked the dangerous potential of the network. The rift inside the group revealed vulnerabilities, but it also foreshadowed a return of violence that could overwhelm unprepared cities, demonstrating that even the most disciplined law enforcement faced an enemy capable of adapting, surviving, and striking again without warning. The first major breakthrough after the ledger's sudden lull came from an unexpected and fragile source, a small-time criminal in Bristol who claimed to have insider knowledge of the organization. His information promised to expose several operatives, including lower-level hitmen who had previously eluded authorities. Desperate to protect his life and avoid retaliation, he approached the police under strict anonymity, offering names, locations, and coded messages he had intercepted from the group. Investigators recognized immediately that this was a rare opportunity, as most insiders either feared the organization too much to speak or had been eliminated before they could come forward. Careful precautions were taken to place him under protective custody in a secure safe house, while authorities prepared to validate and act on the intelligence he provided. The informant's information was chilling. He claimed that the group had been monitoring law enforcement operations for months, and that any perceived lull in activity was a strategic pause to regroup, reassess, and eliminate internal threats. He revealed that the hitmen were not just hired guns, but trained professionals capable of meticulous planning and instant improvisation. Each operative had multiple escape plans and fallback positions in urban and rural environments, making apprehension extremely difficult. He also described an elite tier within the ledger, led by individuals whose identities remained hidden even from the lower-ranking members. It was these elite figures who orchestrated operations, directed assignments, and ensured that no evidence could trace back to the organization itself. Despite these revelations, the situation took a dangerous turn almost immediately. Just days after being placed in protective custody, Informant vanished. Authorities were shocked to discover that he had disappeared from a secure location with alarms and surveillance in place. Video footage, though grainy, revealed a masked figure entering the facility, bypassing multiple security measures, and leaving without triggering any alert that could stop them. No signs of forced entry were found, and every window and door appeared intact, as if the intruder had simply vanished into thin air. Officers realized with growing horror that the intruder's capabilities matched those of the elite hitman described by the informant, leading them to suspect that the disappearance was the work of someone like Grey Wolf himself. The informant's disappearance dealt a blow, not only to the investigation but also to morale within the police force. If the ledger could breach a secure safe house without leaving a trace, it suggested a level of operational sophistication that few officers had ever encountered. The message was clear: even those who tried to help the authorities were not safe. It underscored the organization's ability to monitor, adapt, and neutralize threats in real time, leaving law enforcement with few reliable options. Investigators were forced to rethink their strategy entirely. The loss of the informant meant that lower-level intelligence had been compromised, yet the details he had shared before vanishing remained invaluable. Analysts pored over every piece of information he provided, cross-referencing it with previous operations and patterns. Although the immediate opportunity to apprehend members of the organization had been lost, the incident revealed the terrifying reality of the ledger's reach and power. Even the most protected informants were vulnerable, and the elite operatives could strike anywhere at any time with precision and impunity. The disappearance became a stark reminder that the ledger was not just a criminal organization, it was a highly trained, invisible threat capable of outmaneuvering the police at every turn, and its presence in the UK remained as deadly and mysterious as ever. Months of frustration and near misses had left investigators exhausted, constantly chasing shadows while the ledger continued to elude capture. Then, out of nowhere, an anonymous package arrived at the headquarters of a major law enforcement agency. Its contents were shocking: a meticulously organized collection of documents, bank records, and encrypted correspondence directly linked to the ledger's operation. The files outlined financial transactions, contracts for specific hits, and the names of several lower and mid-level operatives who had carried out assignments across the UK. For the first time, authorities held something tangible, evidence that could potentially dismantle significant portions of the organization. The police quickly realized that the package was far too detailed and precise to have been compiled by chance. Whoever had sent it clearly understood the inner workings of the group and wanted these particular operatives exposed while keeping the identities of the leaders safe. The evidence immediately prompted a series of coordinated raids across multiple cities. Officers executed arrest warrants in London, Manchester, Birmingham, detaining individuals who had been implicated in recent operations. Many of these arrests were low-profile members, people who had previously evaded attention but whose names appeared in the documents. For police, the arrests were a victory, a long-awaited step toward breaking the ledger's network. Yet despite these successes, the package raised troubling questions. The absence of the top-tier hitmen, including Grey Wolf, suggested that whoever had sent the evidence had deliberately protected the most dangerous members. This strategic leak indicated not only insider knowledge but also a motive. Someone within or close to the organization was manipulating events to their advantage. The anonymous package also provided a rare glimpse into the structure and finances of the ledger. Investigators saw how money flowed from clients to intermediaries, how payments were laundered through multiple accounts, and how operations were funded in ways designed to avoid detection. The level of organization was staggering. Each file contained operational notes, timelines, and contingency plans. Analysts noted the professionalism of the documentation. It was as if the organization ran like a business, with managers, field operatives, and accountants, all functioning in perfect synchrony. The sophistication of the records underscored why the ledger had remained untouchable for so long. Yet the police were cautious. They knew that even with this wealth of information, the operation was incomplete. The absence of the elite operatives left the most dangerous elements untouched, capable of continuing attacks or retaliating against those involved in the arrests. It was a reminder that the ledger was not merely a collection of criminals. It was a living, adaptive network. Any misstep could allow its most skilled members to vanish and strike again. Investigators were also intrigued by the possible identity of the anonymous sender. Analysts speculated that it could be a former Remmer seeking protection, a rival within the organization attempting to eliminate competitors, or even an insider acting to consolidate power. Regardless of the motive, the leak revealed cracks in the organization's unity and suggested that internal loyalties were shifting. The package became a pivotal tool for law enforcement, enabling targeted arrests while simultaneously highlighting the ongoing threat posed by the group's leaders. Despite the progress, the arrival of the package did not end the mystery. It left investigators with the uneasy realization that the ledger was still operational, still highly organized, and still capable of eluding capture. The arrest disrupted part of the network, but the true masterminds remained hidden, moving unseen through the shadows. The anonymous leak had provided an opportunity, but it also reminded everyone involved that this was far from over. The ledger's power, adaptability, and cunning meant that even with substantial intelligence, the hunt for the organization's leaders and the most dangerous hitmen in the UK was only just beginning. Despite multiple arrests and a sudden influx of intelligence, the investigation into the ledger left authorities with an unsettling reality. The most dangerous hitmen, including Grey Wolf, remained at large. Their absence from the recent raids proved that even the most coordinated law enforcement efforts could only reach the lower levels of the organization. For investigators, this was a bitter revelation. The arrests provided a sense of progress and a short-term victory, but they did little to eliminate the real threat that lurked in the shadows. Police knew the elite members were still operational, capable of orchestrating further hits or retaliations with precision. It became clear that the ledger had learned from every confrontation, adapting its methods to stay several steps ahead. Sightings of key members continued to surface across the UK, though none were verified. Reports came from Scotland, Northern Ireland, and even as far as mainland Europe. Each claim was vague: a figure slipping into a crowd, a helmeted rider disappearing down narrow alleys, or a shadowy figure exiting a ferry terminal in France. While the sightings were never confirmed, they served as chilling reminders that the ledger's reach was not limited to the UK. Analysts suggested that the organization could easily relocate operatives to evade detection, using safe houses, encrypted communications, and covert networks to continue operations undisturbed. The inability to confirm these movements reinforced the fear surrounding the group. It seemed as though the hitmen could appear and vanish at will, leaving the country with a constant sense of vulnerability. The mysterious package that had enabled the recent arrests only added to the intrigue. While it contained valuable information on lower-level members, it conspicuously avoided revealing the identities of the elite operatives. This suggested a deliberate, calculated move by someone inside the organization, perhaps a factional leader, a former operative seeking protection, or even the mastermind himself. Investigators speculated that the leak might have been designed to remove internal competition, weaken parts of the network, or manipulate law enforcement into focusing on operatives whose removal served the sender's agenda. The package had helped dismantle some elements of the ledger, but it also highlighted the sophistication and long-term planning of the remaining leadership. For law enforcement, the challenge was no longer just about catching criminals. It had become a psychological battle. Investigators had to anticipate the movements of individuals who were masters of disguise, highly intelligent, and ruthlessly patient. Every plan for surveillance or intervention required careful consideration of contingencies, as a single misstep could allow a top operative to vanish entirely or strike in retaliation. Analysts emphasized that the true threat was not the arrested members, but the invisible network that still controlled operations, communicated through secure channels, and maintained the ability to strike without warning. Public perception had shifted as well. Media reports and rumors kept citizens on edge, and fear of the ledger persisted despite the arrests. The notion that elite hitmen were still at large created an aura of invincibility, making the organization a symbol of untouchable criminal power. Even law enforcement officers acknowledged that the network's most skilled members operated in a class of their own, blending into society while remaining constantly mobile and unpredictable. As the investigation continued, authorities understood that capturing Grey Wolf and the other elite operatives would require extraordinary ingenuity, patience, and risk. The ledger had proven that it could survive scrutiny, betrayal, and law enforcement pressure. Its remaining members had become ghosts, untraceable, highly intelligent, and strategically untouchable. The final mystery of the anonymous package, the missing operatives, and their continued mobility left a haunting question: would these hitmen ever be caught, or would they remain shadows within the UK's criminal underworld, striking fear long after the headlines faded? The case remained open, a stark reminder that some dangers are not only real but persistent, invisible, and terrifyingly efficient.